Sometimes startups get stuck by software providers. And most of the time, it's not because providers are bad or want to rob your startup. It's because you do not establish the right framework with them, which lead both of you to take risks. In today's episode, we are talking about how you can establish a healthy relationship between your startup and your provider. Hi, I'm Amaury, founder and CEO at MyCTOFriend, where founders come to learn how to build their tech startup. And with this Startup Snack series available on both podcast and YouTube, we want to share the essential to make it easier for you to build your tech startup. And as an external CTO, one of the classical scenarios I see really often is this. The founder got a great idea. He or she searched for a provider in his network or her network. Most of the time, the provider isn't the best match from a technology point of view, but that's not really where the problem is. The problem is in the nature of the project. It's a startup, and a startup idea change and evolve over time, especially during the development phase. So if the provider isn't really used to work with startups, he might get mad with endless changes in over-demanding specifications. And the worst case scenario happens when startup and provider make this type of deal. First, you might want to sign a contract with 30 to 30% upfront payment. So far, nothing wrong, it's usual, and that's not where the risks are, to be honest. Then you do a second payment on mid-term delivery, after maybe design or maybe a few screens delivery or the dashboard to see if things goes on the right path. And then comes the last delivery with the last payment and the final source code delivery. This type of deal is pretty classic, and any client and provider in the corporate world. And that's actually the thing. They both know what they want and what to expect, and it's fine. But in the startup world, it's really risky because the expectations are changing along the way. There might be some disappointment and deceptions on both sides. The provider might end up to do more work than expected, and the startup might expect more complex product just because some feature looked obvious, like a back office or like some obvious things that wasn't really mentioned in the beginning. And that's where the conflict zone can be. Here, the risks is that each of them are expecting something from the other. Startup might say, okay, deliver what is expected and I will pay you the final payment. While provider might say, yeah, but we've spent more time than expected. You change things all the time. So you have to pay us the time that we spent and we will finish the development. Usually, this type of endless negotiation are hard to solve and both sides usually feel scammed. So here is the solution that I do recommend. First rule, the source code should be delivered on daily basis by using the startup repository. The first log that some provider will use in conflict situation are the source code retention. But here providers might say, yeah, but I cannot take the risks of delivering the source code and of not being paid for the work I do. Okay, that's right, but wait a minute. We also need to reduce the risk for you providers, especially if you work with startups. So instead of doing a 3-split payment, we can split it in more payment with the delivery planning. And we can still start with like 20% or 30% upfront. It's not a big deal for startups because that's not where the risks are. Usually the risks are on the second tier of the project. And it's also a good way to show to providers that by paying 20 to 30%, you are serious about working with them and you want to work with them on long term. So we can pay the provider then on small deliveries, and it reduces risks on both sides, on the provider and on your side as well, because you have the source code from the day one. So if your provider do not deliver what is expected along the way, like on the 40% and the 50% payment, then it might highlight some misunderstanding on the deal early on, which is great because it reduces the conflict early on. It's healthier, safer for everyone. So if you are dealing with a provider, don't try to keep the payment for the last minute to secure your project. You will actually do the opposite and increase the risks. Negotiate to have the source code from day one. You can also mention that it's a requirement for any due diligence with your investors, which is actually true. I don't know a single investor who will invest in a startup that doesn't have the control and the ownership on its development. And that's the same thing with the infrastructure, by the way. You can, of course, delegate the server management and app publication to your provider, but it has to be with your own hosting and your own cloud accounts. And don't get me wrong, working with provider is certainly the easiest way to get started with your startup. They have experience. They can dedicate like 2 to 3 developers to develop your solution faster, and then keep your expenses low when you will promote your solution, when it will be ready. Yes, it's more expensive altogether than a salary, but it's very convenient from a time and a cash flow management perspective. I hope this content will help you. Let us know in the YouTube comment section. Of course, if you enjoy learning and spending a bit of your time with me today, consider subscribing. Help us spread the word by hitting the like button and by sharing with your entrepreneur friends. And if you have any question or want to suggest a topic, feel free to drop us a comment on YouTube or Instagram. I'm looking forward to hearing from you. Bye.